Princess Lyraves was third in line to the throne of the Celestial Dominion, a vast empire spanning 36 systems, controlling trade routes and wielding military power that shaped galactic politics. She'd been raised for this role since birth. Endless training in diplomacy, military strategy, cultural traditions, and the careful performance of imperial authority. The Silmary royal family didn't just rule, they embodied the empire's identity, with distinctive pointed ears and skin that shifted through luminous colors representing strength and unity. But Lyra had spent 28 years learning that being royalty meant being a symbol rather than a person. Her opinions mattered only when they aligned with imperial policy. Her relationships were political tools. Her life was prescribed by protocols, with every decision filtered through what serves the empire rather than what do you want. She was told this was honor, duty, privilege, that billions depended on the royal family's leadership, and that personal desires were selfish luxuries. Until she met Captain David Chen. He was assigned as military liaison during coalition joint exercises, coordinating human forces with Silmary protocols. Nothing romantic, just professional cooperation. Except David treated her like a person. When she expressed opinions, he engaged with substance rather than automatically deferring to rank. When she made strategic errors in simulations, he corrected her politely but directly. When they had downtime, he asked what she thought about things unrelated to duty, just genuine curiosity about her as an individual. Over 6 months, Lyra fell in love with someone who saw her as Lyra rather than as Princess Lyraves, representative of imperial authority. And David, despite initially maintaining professional distance, eventually admitted he'd fallen for her too, not for her status or power, but for the person beneath the protocols. Now Lyra faced an impossible choice. Her family was arranging a political marriage to Prince Kethar of the Vaindari Collective, an alliance securing critical trade agreements and military cooperation. Strategically essential, politically necessary, personally devastating. She could refuse. Technically, she had that right. But refusing would create diplomatic incident, potentially destabilize alliances, and mark her as unsuitable for succession. David knew about the arranged marriage. They'd been careful since, maintaining professional distance in public while having private conversations that felt like saying goodbye in slow motion. "You should accept the marriage," David said during one of their final meetings, his voice carrying pain from sacrificing what you want for what seems right. "The alliance matters. Refusing this marriage could destabilize your empire's eastern frontier. That's billions of lives affected by our personal feelings." "I know," Lyra said, her skin showing profound conflict. "I've had the briefings, but I'm so tired of being told my feelings matter less than imperial necessity. That loving you is selfish indulgence I should sacrifice for duty." She looked at him directly. "Is it wrong that I don't want to spend my life married to someone I don't love for trade agreements, that I want to choose my own life?" "It's not wrong," David said quietly. "It's human, or Silmary equivalent, wanting agency, wanting your feelings to matter. But wanting something doesn't make it possible. You're not just any person. You're royalty with billions depending on your decisions." Over following weeks, Lyra went through motions of preparing for the political marriage while feeling like she was dying inside. The empire celebrated. Strategic analysts praised the diplomatic brilliance. Her family expressed satisfaction. And Lyra realized the empire would never see her as a person whose feelings mattered. She was a political asset whose value was measured by what she could provide for imperial interests. She thought about her future. Decades married to someone she didn't love, bearing children who'd be raised as political assets like she was, performing the role while the person she actually was slowly suffocated. And she made a decision that shocked everyone. She wasn't doing it. 3 days before the scheduled wedding, Princess Lyraves announced she was renouncing her claim to succession, declining the political marriage, and leaving the imperial family. Not in disgrace, but as deliberate choice to reclaim her life. The empire erupted. Conservative factions called it betrayal. Her family was torn between understanding her desire for autonomy and horror at political fallout. The arranged marriage was cancelled. The Vaindari Collective was offended. Alliances were destabilized, but Lyra was done apologizing for wanting to be a person rather than a political instrument. She gave one public statement: "I was born into royalty and taught that duty to empire supersedes all personal desires, that wanting my own life was selfish luxury. I've spent 28 years living as a symbol, sacrificing personal autonomy for what serves the empire. But I've learned something the empire doesn't teach: being a person, having agency over your life, choosing your relationships, that's not selfish luxury. It's fundamental right." Her skin showed absolute determination. "I'm renouncing succession, not because I don't value the dominion, but because I can't continue sacrificing my entire existence for imperial necessity. My siblings are capable. They'll serve well, possibly better than I would have while resenting every moment. I choose to be a person rather than a symbol." She didn't mention David explicitly. Everyone knew. David, following the crisis with growing horror, found Lyra after her statement. "You renounced succession. You walked away from an empire. For the possibility of choosing my own life," Lyra completed. "Not just for you, though you're a significant part. For being a person whose feelings matter, whose life isn't entirely dictated by imperial necessity." The political fallout was immense. The Celestial Dominion adjusted. The Vaindari Collective negotiated alternatives. Strategic analysts recalculated. And Lyra, no longer princess, just Lyra, began building a life that was hers. She and David didn't immediately live happily ever after. The choice was just the beginning. She was a former princess of a major power, making her politically sensitive. He was a military officer whose relationship created questions about divided loyalties, but they navigated it together. Lyra found work as diplomatic consultant, her imperial training proving valuable without royal authority. David continued military service, carefully distant from anything involving the Celestial Dominion. They built ordinary life, making decisions together, having disagreements that didn't carry imperial weight, creating meaning through choices rather than duty. 3 years after renunciation, a reporter asked if she regretted giving up an empire for love. Lyra answered honestly, "I didn't give up an empire for love. I gave up being a symbol for the possibility of being a person with agency. Loving David, was catalyst that made me question whether living as political instrument was sustainable. But the choice wasn't between empire and love. It was between continuing to sacrifice my entire existence for imperial necessity or claiming right to be a person whose feelings matter." Her skin showed contentment rather than carefully controlled royal displays. "Do I regret it? No. Being royalty meant comfort, power, importance, but every aspect was dictated by what served the empire. Being with David means navigating ordinary challenges, but it also means my life is mine. That freedom is worth more than any throne." David said, "Lyra didn't give up an empire for me personally. She gave up being a political instrument for authentic life. I'm part of that life, but not the reason. I'm evidence of what she was choosing toward. The courage to walk away from power, prestige, and the only identity you've known because continuing means never being a real person, that's extraordinary. Because they'd learned that gilded cages remain cages. That duty becomes oppression when it requires complete sacrifice of autonomy. And that sometimes the most revolutionary act is choosing to be a person rather than a symbol, even when that means walking away from everything society says you should want." Lyra let go of an entire galaxy, not because she valued it less than love, but because she valued being a person more than being a political instrument. And in choosing authenticity over duty, she gained something imperial power couldn't provide: the freedom to be herself. Years later, when her younger sister became empress, she privately thanked Lyra. "Watching you choose yourself over imperial necessity taught me about leadership. That forcing people into lives they don't choose creates resentment, undermining everything we build. Your sacrifice has influenced how I approach leadership, making space for autonomy rather than demanding